Senator Tim Scott, welcome to Washington Times Higher Ground. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. I love the concept of higher ground. That's a good way to start.
It is. And we're going to talk a lot about faith today, but I want to dive right in. I have to ask you, you are vying for one of the most difficult jobs in the world. I think it is the most difficult job in the world, president. What motivated you to launch your run?
I believe America can do for anyone what she has done for me. The opportunity to restore hope, create opportunities, and protect the America that we love. It is a blessing from God and the American people that a kid raised in poverty by a single parent mama, I now have the opportunity to represent our nation and to restore the clear, common sense values that come from the gospel and from just good old fashioned, I said, common sense. What a blessing to live in a country. That's what Billy, I oftentimes say, we have all won the lottery of citizenship because being an American is the greatest, highest citizenship on earth. So I'm running for president because I have confidence in the future of this great nation.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really differentiates you from a lot of other people. You talk about the positive nature of America. And sadly, we don't often have those conversations. Even on the 4th of July, there was at least one brand, Ben and Jerry's essentially tweeting about how the US is on stolen land. It's always sort of this negative view of the country. And it feels like that has gotten worse in recent years. What do you think drives that narrative?
Well, when you indoctrinate your kids instead of educating your kids, when you tell your kids and you hear on the news day in and day out that America is a racist, declining country, that the best is behind us, people start asking questions. Is that true? Well, let me just answer the question for every single person watching, listening, or reading what's going to happen next. Of course, we are the greatest country on earth. We are the city on the hill. In the midst of the storm, look for America because we are like the beacon. We lead to true north. We are the one nation that has struggled and fought for the freedom of those captive. We have so much to celebrate. And if we spent more time encouraging and motivating and helping people understand who we are, we'd be just fine. But unfortunately, Billy, as you know, I believe that the radical left, they are literally trying to change the very DNA of what it means to be an American.
Well, and you went on The View, and it was a really, really interesting dialogue for those who did not see it. First of all, you were very bold to go on The View because a lot of people would avoid it and wouldn't do it. What was your big takeaway after that? Because that I found the conversation, particularly on race in America, really interesting.
Well, I think sometimes you have to go where you're not invited. And frankly, we went on The View because we needed to go. We have to have a serious conversation about the history of this nation. It is provocative, it is painful, but the progress in this nation is palpable. So to hear these women, frankly, 40% of the women being minorities, is actually 60% being minorities, 40% being African American, say that in order to succeed in America, you have to be an exception and not the rule. When the rule on the very program that I'm on, 60% are minorities, women of color. That's a good news celebration that America's come that far on TV. Now, I would recommend that we have conservatives not bleeding our liberals on any TV show. But here's the truth. When you hear powerful voices in the media or in the Biden administration saying that in order to succeed in this nation as a person of color, you have to be an exception, that is offensive, it is dangerous, and it is disgusting. And you shouldn't just say that when you're not on the show. You should look into their eyes. You should go on their set and say the same thing. I'm not attacking the women. I am, however, attacking the philosophy that says to succeed in America, you have to do something very, very different. Actually, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr. all fought for America to be more of herself, not less. And if we shared the whole story of American history, we would find that the Judeo-Christian foundation is why we succeeded as a nation through the hardest times a nation could face.
And that's actually a great pivot into faith, because I want to talk to you not only about your personal faith, but about the country right now. And let's start there, because it does feel like, and I don't think it's just a feeling, I think we're seeing it in the stats and the numbers and the polling, that this notion of Judeo-Christian values of a relationship with God is being pushed away from us. And we're watching a lot happen, I think, culturally as a result of that. Talk a little bit about what you think is happening in society as maybe a result of that secularization.
Well, there's been a 60-year war on faith in America. There is no doubt. You look back to when prayer was taken out of school, when today coaches at the end of a football game are being fired, and you have to go all the way to the Supreme Court to restore the fact that the First Amendment protects our religious liberties. It doesn't confine our religious liberties. When we see, whether you're on a TV screen or on a radio station, the denigration of faith. Think about the Los Angeles Dodgers and the absolute insanity that ensued around that stadium as they denigrated the Catholic faith. I can't think of anything more un-American, unacceptable, and antithetical to what it means to be an American than what we saw on that day. And then, frankly, at the White House, when you allow for topless women to show up and to celebrate Pride Month, listen, everybody can have different views on things, but there is a level of insanity that is circulating throughout our country. And it's the lack of our faith-filled positions. It's a lack of our faith-filled foundation that is steering this nation off course. The good news is our people are strong. Our government is weak. But the indoctrination for 6 decades has impact. It is time to turn it around. And that's one of the most important reasons I'm running for president.
Well, and let's talk about your personal faith, because your Christian faith, it shines through, and it's not just, I've heard you speak a lot on it. We've interviewed in the past. And when you talk about faith, it's very clear that this is very real to you. It's who you are. It's a part of, your journey. How did you, let's kind of go back in time, and feel free to dive into your personal story here, but how did you come into faith?
Well, Billy, I'll say this. I had a great friend at a movie theater. I was 15 years old, and I was living in a very small apartment. He was living in a trailer park, and I would come to work every day, and I'd ask a similar question, at least weekly. Why are you so happy? We have no resources. We're working 70 hours a week. And he simply said, Jesus Christ is the Lord of my life. I was like, what else? I knew there had to be more than just that. But the truth is that the longer I lived and the more I realized that there is something different about Roger and his witness. He didn't proselytize, so to speak. He didn't preach at me. He actually, and I believe this to be true, St. Francis of Assisi said, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one. What he actually said was, proselytize always. When necessary, use words. That is such a powerful understanding of my faith. My faith simply says that I should live it better and more than I speak it. And so what I've tried to do is make sure that I model the behavior I want others to follow, because it was modeled before me and it led me to making a life-altering, eternity-changing, personal transformation. Thank God Almighty that his son rose from the grave. But more importantly, I was on that football scholarship, very small football scholarship at Presbyterian College. I was at an FCA meeting. I had a horrible car accident the year before during my football season, where I lost my first 6 weeks of my senior football season because I fell asleep driving at the wheel, went through the windshield, came back in, and ultimately ended up, because of that car accident, missing the first 6 weeks of my senior football season. And I thought my life was over because football was my life. Jesus was just a game. But on a small football scholarship at Presbyterian College, I realized I had it inverted, that actually Jesus was my life and football was just a game. And as a kid raised in poverty, as I've said before, in a single parent household, I always wanted a father's acceptance. I always wanted to be defined by my family lineage. And what I found in my faith was just that. Galatians 3:28 says, I was adopted into the family. If I wanted to know more about my Abba Father, I could read his good book called the Bible. I could discover all that he said about me, but more importantly, all that he said about himself and all that he is. And when you realize that, faith is always a personal journey towards significance. Never is it really about success. It's about significance. But the good news is the more significant you are, it leads to a lot of success.
Yeah, and finding that significance in the Lord, finding that purpose. I think a lot of us, we get sort of dragged into different arenas, whether it's politics or media or wherever you are in life, feeling like that's where your purpose is going to be, just like with football for you at that point. And when that thing goes away or something doesn't go right, if your purpose and your value are in the wrong place, it shatters everything. How do you keep that perspective? I mean, again, you right now you are on one of the biggest stages in the world, and you seem very measured and calm. What does your day to day look like in keeping that perspective with God?
Well, Billy, thank you for that. I've often said that your habits will determine your lifestyle. And so what I try to do is remember the formula that I work from, which is TSA: think, speak, and act. So if I'm going to think right, I have to first immerse myself in the gospel every morning. I read a chapter and I do a couple of devotionals. Then I have to speak. I'm a big believer that Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Therefore, you're going to eat the fruit thereof. So for me, I have to speak in a way that's consistent with what I just read. And then James 2:17 says, faith without works is dead. And so I have to act in a way that's consistent with what I spoke, which has to be consistent with what I read. And so I start my day off in the gospel, and then I have good music. And then I go to the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Times. I spend my time investing in conservative publications that are not trying to indoctrinate me or teach me what I should be thinking. They lay the facts out, and I come to my own conclusion. All those things I think stimulates growth, and it actually stirs intellectual curiosity. When you're intellectually curious, I think it also expands your capacity. So that is what I consider my beginning of every day starts in the same way, and it has for several years now. And that gives me a peace that transcends understanding, and it gives me the ability to remember 1 Peter 5:7 that if I cast all my care upon the Lord, He'll care for me.
I love that. Well, what do you say to people, as we get close to the end of our conversation here, who would say, I don't want to hear my candidates talk about their faith? I mean, you hear a lot of people on the left say this, your faith is personal. Don't talk about it in public. I don't want a candidate or a president doing that. How do you respond to those sorts of critiques?
Well, I would simply say this: each and every person running for president or running at home, our faith guides us, it directs us, and it is visible in what we talk about or what we don't talk about. So the truth of the matter is, whether you believe or whether you don't believe, you believe in something. You have faith in something, even if it's just yourself. And that's a limited worldview if your greatest ideal is that you are the center of the universe. I tried that, by the way, and it fails. So I understand it. I'll just simply say that everybody believes something. No one keeps their faith at home. Anybody who suggests that, in the words of a Southerner, hogwash. It always shows up in the marketplace. It always shows up in political discussion. And frankly, we're seeing that today in ways that we never would have imagined just 10 years ago. So
Even 3 years ago, I mean, even 3 years ago, if you had told
well,
me we'd be talking about the things we're talking about right now, I
definitely
would have said, no,
no.
there's no, because everybody has a worldview. Everybody has a worldview, right? And I think right now we're watching what happens when one worldview is thrown out and a secular worldview is put in place. And so there are consequences to that culturally.
Well, Billy, you said it very well, and reminds me of something I've said a couple times before, is that if they can cancel conservatives, there's actually no debate. So, what I believe the radical left is trying to do in today's America is to cancel conservatism. When you cancel conservatism, when you label us racist or homophobic or something, you cancel our part of the debate. When that happens, you only have one ideology in a pluralistic society. That is like being tone deaf. It's impossible.
Yeah.
We must continue to speak up and to be loud. But listen, my faith teaches me more about how to respond to how you treat me than it does how you're supposed to treat me. I have I unfortunately and fortunately have a level that I have to participate in, a level of decency. I'd call it normalcy that requires me to be meek, not weak. And you know the difference as a person of faith. But the truth is that's harnessed power. Jesus also cleaned out the temple because they were doing things that were egregious, that were just unethical. If you don't want to take a stand and fight for the values of this country, the foundational principles that make America the most exceptional country on earth, that's not being a person of faith. Being a person of faith is defending the values that are necessary for human flourishing, and they always come from the gospel of Jesus Christ.
What an amazing note to end on, Senator. Thank you so much for your time today.
God bless. See you soon, Billy. Thank you for your time.